So I'm guessing, caught something. I'm guessing that that sounds familiar to a lot of you. You've probably heard it on a warm night when you're sitting in your backyard, or maybe as you're walking home from work, or maybe even right in the middle of the city when you're out for your Friday night drinks. But you might not know what it is. So I'm here to tell you that that is actually the white-striped free-tailed bat, and it's a pretty amazing creature that occurs all across Melbourne. These are all the records we have for it, and I actually suspect that if everyone who heard it lodged a record, that map would be covered in purple dots. And it's actually one of 5 microbat species that we get right in the heart of Melbourne. It's a real testament to how resilient and hardy these species can be, and they often manage to persist where all other native fauna have gone extinct. Which is great, of course, but unfortunately, Greater Melbourne is actually home to 14 species of microbat, and that means we've lost 9 species from the city as a result of the massive habitat modification that comes as you build a city. So the story of microbats isn't one of resilience alone, and that brings me to another sound that I want to play for you, and I'm guessing that this is going to be a little less familiar. So that sound is the last known call of the last known individual of the Christmas Island pipistrelle, and it managed to evade capture of the researchers who were trying to save the species, basically. But it was, they didn't quite manage, and in 2009 it was gone. And that added to Australia's long and sad history of mammal extinctions. Now, we know that these extinctions are due to a number of causes, but undoubtedly one of the most important is habitat loss. And the habitat loss that we focus on in our research is that of tree hollows, because tree hollows provide basically homes to over 200 of Australia's native species. But we continue to lose large old hollow-bearing trees from the landscape, and it's quite depressing to work on. But we're not going to depress you tonight. Instead, we're here. We're going to tell you the story about a local example of a group of people, and one person in particular, who set out to do something about it. And this is the story of the Organ Pipes National Park. So for those of you who don't know the Organ Pipes, it's out near the airport. And it started pretty unremarkably. It was basically, I won't mince my words, a clapped out dairy paddock. And the only reason it became a national park in 1972 is because of these exceptional geological features that you can see there. Nonetheless, it became a park, and in the late 70s, the Friends of the Organ Pipes got to work and they started defiantly planting vegetation in amongst the thistles. And they kept working. 20 years later, that vegetation had grown big enough not to have formed hollows, but to support bat boxes. Originally, they put up 10 boxes. This has slowly become 37 boxes. And since they were put up, those boxes have been checked every 1 or 2 months, continuously. So every bat that we find in those boxes is weighed, measured, sexed, and it's given a unique identifying band that has a number on it that you can see here. So from its pretty humble beginnings, this has grown to now become the longest running bat box monitoring program in the world.
And you can't reach a milestone like that without a lot of help. And we've been very fortunate at Organ Pipes across the 25 years since these boxes were put up to have 488 volunteers to date come along and be part of this project, carrying ladders, helping carry the bats, release the bats, record data, all sorts of things. But it's more than that. You can't just have a whole group of people, 488 people coming every now and again doesn't do it. You need a core group of really dedicated individuals. Dr. Natasha Shedman was the first scientist to really put many, many years into this project. But there's someone that I want to acknowledge tonight, Robert Bender. He's sitting in the audience. Here he is here, for those that obviously can't see him because he's sitting in the dark. He was one of the team that originally put the boxes up 25 years ago, and since then has voluntarily given thousands of hours to this project. When everything looked like it was about to fall over, he kept at it and made sure that it stayed up and running. And it's not just the incredible data set that we've now got because of his dedication, it's also the countless members of the public that have been exposed to the wonders and had their curiosity aroused about bats and the ones that are living around us, but most of us don't actually know that they're there. So an incredible legacy. So here is almost 25 years worth of bat box checks. And when I look at this graph, it reminds me of weather data. And to some extent it is, because the behaviour of bats are dictated by the seasons. So the peaks that you see occur because bats form colonies, maternity colonies during the warmer months to raise their young. And then Gould's wattle bats, which are the most common animals that you find in the boxes, here they all are stuffed in together, At the end of that warm period, they actually they mate, and then the females store the sperm over winter. And in the spring, the females impregnate themselves with that stored sperm, and they give birth to twins. So every year, Gould's wattlebat females give birth to twins. We know that they start breeding in their second year. And we've been able to track these banded individuals. We know that they live 11 or 12 years, and they can breed right through until their final year. So there's no menopause in bats like there is in humans. One of the really powerful things about this long-term project is that we'll be able to see changes in breeding success year to year. And there was a long, horrible drought through the 2000s that I'm sure you remember. In 2007, 2008, we got a snifter of rain, thought the drought was going to break, it didn't. In 2010, I'm sure people remember Elizabeth Street looking something like this. There was torrential rain. In both of those years, Gould wattlebats didn't just have one set of twins, they had two. They bred again, and we're yet to work out how they've managed this. If they breed the autumn prior, what's the female doing? She stored sperm over winter. She tucked a little bit away for a rainy day. Maybe she has. We don't know. But it's fascinating to have been able to witness these events and know it sets this species in great stead in terms of their persistence in the urban environment if they can respond to the good years in this way. So here's what our urban environment looks like. This is the north of Melbourne. Here's the Maribyrnong. Here's the Yarra. And here is Organ Pipes National Park. So another part of this good news story is that we know from genetic work that the population of Gould's wattlebat at Organ Pipes National Park is highly connected to other populations of Gould's wattlebat around Melbourne. And there is another population roosting in bat boxes down here in Wilson Reserve, and I'll let you guess who set them up. Thank you, Robert. Again, another long-term data set well on its way. We know from genetic work that these two populations are pretty much one. Genetically, they look like one. We have sibling pairs across the two. These animals get to about 15 grams and the males disperse. They're crossing 50 kilometres of highly disturbed, highly fragmented landscapes on a regular enough basis for this to look like one population. So that bodes really well for their persistence long-term. So we've not just been learning about bat biology, we've also been learning about how bat boxes can function as a conservation tool. So we've had many iterations of these boxes along the way. This one here has a narrower entrance. This is where the bats come in, and it's being favoured by smaller species. This one's aptly named the large forest bat. It's very, very tiny indeed, but it appreciates having a narrower entrance, presumably so nothing larger than itself can follow it into the box. And then we have very large boxes that are being favoured by the largest microbats, which is the white-striped freetail. We also have boxes with different wall thicknesses. So this one here has very thick walls, and it's preferred over winter for the bats that overwinter at the site, which is rare in itself. But as well as these intended outcomes, we're finding from our long-term data set that installing bat boxes can also have unintended consequences.
So as I mentioned earlier, we know there are 14 species of microbat across Greater Melbourne, and if you plot the records, this is what the frequency distribution looks like. So you can see, oh no, I gave away my slides. You can see that some species are more common than others, but all in all, there's pretty good representation. Now the problem is that when the person climbs down the ladder and hands you a bag of bats and you open it up, more often than not, that's what you see, a whole lot of little Gould's wattlebats peering back at you, which is adorable, but not necessarily what we always want. And if we look at what we're actually getting in the boxes, the distribution looks a bit more like this. And in fact, we've pulled 20,000 Gould's wattlebats out of the boxes over the 25 years of this program, and not many other species. And some species that we know are pretty common in Melbourne, like the lesser long-eared bat and the little forest bat, haven't used the organ pipes boxes at all. And it's not just what's in the boxes, it's what's around the boxes as well. So this is the trapping data that the Friends group have collected since 1988. And 1994 is when the boxes started getting used. And you can see here, early on in the program, they were getting lots and lots of large forest bats and little forest bats. But as the program progressed and the boxes became more established, that trapping data becomes more and more dominated by Gould's wattlebat. So this really led us to ask, what's with all the Goulds? Why are we getting this species so consistently? And we thought about its ecology a bit, and as Lisa mentioned earlier, we know that this species, unlike most microbats, actually has twins, and it's capable of breeding twice in a single year. So it's also able to occupy a whole range of environments. It basically occurs everywhere, from the hottest of the red centre to the coldest parts of Tassie. It forms habitat for the Gould's wattlebat. So we thought maybe it's the environments that the boxes are providing that are causing it to dominate. And so we set out with a couple of experiments. The first thing we did was we thought about colour. Now, all the boxes at the organ pipes are dark green, and so we ran an experiment where we set up all different coloured boxes facing all different directions, and we chucked a bunch of temperature loggers in there, and we also locked the ambient temperatures. And then we thought we'd try a couple of alternative approaches. So we set up another experiment where we had nest boxes, but we also had hollowed out logs attached to the trees, and we cut hollows into the trees using a chainsaw. And then we also put loggers, ambient loggers, and had loggers in natural hollows. What we found, much to our horror, was that the north-facing dark green boxes were getting up to 55 degrees on a 38-degree day. So they're really not doing their job of buffering whatever's living inside of it from the outside environment, and they're actually making it worse. And this was really supported by the other experiment as well. You can see here the dark line is the nest boxes, and it's basically fluctuating massively with ambient temperatures relative to the natural hollows, which are the darker grey line, whereas the log hollows and the chainsaw hollows, the dotted lines, are staying much more stable. And this really gives us hope that there are practical things that we can do to provide better homes for sensitive and rarer species.
So I think we can safely say that Robert didn't really imagine that this is what the project would turn into 25 years ago when he helped put up those first 10 boxes. We have learnt so much about both the biology of the bats and the function of boxes as a conservation tool, but there is much more to learn. And the challenge really for the next decade, as I see it, is to find out how we provide a conservation tool that is for more than one species, not just Gould's wattlebat. How do we keep the whole bat community present in that fragmented urban environment? But I think the most important message at this stage really is that offsetting natural tree hollows is not a simple process. You can't just stick up a bunch of boxes and say, job done. And really, for the foreseeable future, giants like these are going to remain truly irreplaceable. Thank you.